I've seen a lot of different video game platforms over the years, and nothing excites me more than something new. And in this case, that's a crank. A crank that's attached to a charming mini Game Boy looking thing that's been a long time coming, after first being revealed back in 2019. But is the crank just a gimmick, or a new age of handhelds? And are the games you'll be using it to play worth your time and money? Well, let's dive into GameXplain's review. Don't let the Playdate's retro look and black and white screen fool you. It's a very new and very yellow handheld by Panic, who you might know as a publisher of Firewatch and an indie game about a troublesome goose that never had a title. It's a very Nintendo-like device in that it's not trying to be cutting edge, but to be unique and innovate instead. And a key part of this is how the Playdate receives new games, because though it may come with 2 out of the box, there are 24 waiting for you in total as part of Season 1, and they're all included in the Playdate's $179 price tag. They're delivered to the device 2 at a time, every Monday, over the course of a 12-week period. It's actually kind of exciting, like a mini Christmas morning every week. The games are even gift wrapped for you, complete with a little bow, before being torn open by a pair of mechanical clamps, adding to the Playdate's charm. And most of the games are developed not only by different developers, but some pretty famous ones too, including Katamari Damacy's creator Kita Takahashi, Giles Goddard of 1080 snowboarding fame, and the man who helped us get over it, Bennett Foddy. When I first picked up the Playdate, I was surprised by how solid it felt despite its small size, weighing in at a mere 86 grams. But perhaps the toyish look threw me off. You know, it's just a bit smaller than a Game Boy SP in length, but it is a lot thinner. It feels well built, especially with the metal used for the crank, rivets, and speaker cover, along with a matte plastic feel on the surface, and clicky buttons more on the plasticky side. I was most excited to try out the crank, as it reminded me of an arcade trackball, or this Taito Paddle DS controller add-on I have, for how precise they can be, giving a new way to play games. And I'm happy to say that after using it extensively, it made my Taito Paddle feel like crap, unfortunately, as the crank feels extremely solid and precise, and it isn't flimsy in the slightest. Impressively, the crank stays perfectly in place when you stop spinning it, so I couldn't blame anyone but myself whenever I went slightly too far and hit something in Crankin's time travel adventure. Interestingly, the Playdate can even detect when the crank is docked or not, and has adorable sound effects to go with it. When undocking, the movement is fairly smooth and sturdy until right to the very end, when it satisfyingly snaps into position. Once there, it's pretty sturdy and takes a decent amount of initial force to pull the crank back out. More than enough to hold it in place while spinning, even at speeds that my life in Mario Party depended on it. I was actually surprised at how fast some games wanted the crank to spin, like, okay, I hope you don't break. But it could withstand it hardware and software wise. There is a slight bit of give with the plastic handle, being able to swivel in place, but it was never a bother during gameplay. Beyond the buttons and crank, there are a few other input options too, such as a microphone and accelerometer, although both are barely used at this time. One downside for the device is that the hard edge along the bottom sometimes felt like it was digging into my fingers. It's something I really noticed that I used in games that more of our traditional button layout instead of the crank. It's a little bit annoying, but adjusting my grip was usually enough to resolve this discomfort. And although I wasn't able to test it out, the Playdate cover would likely help to avoid this. Notably, there's some accessibility options too, allowing you to flip the screen vertically and use the crank on the side, along with reducing flashing. Speaking of the screen, I was surprised to find out it isn't backlit. It felt like a throwback to the original Game Boy days, for better or worse. But unlike Game Boy, the Playdate screen is super sharp, even when moving quickly. And to be clear, there's no brightness or screen setting on the Playdate, though the high contrast black and white visuals are generally easy to see, at least outdoors. While using it inside, I did find myself angling for a better view at times, or tilting the Playdate towards the light, although sometimes it's not nearly as troublesome as it was on Game Boy. Another option is to connect it to your PC with the included yellow USB cord, and play and record or stream games using Playdate Mirror. This allows you also to double your screen resolution and use a controller if you want to. I didn't really enjoy using the right analog stick though compared to the crank. You know, the actual thing is better. Where the Playdate really shines is when it's shining bright out, as its super reflective screen is perfectly visible outside. Even when the sun is hurting my eyes beaming, I can still see the Playdate just fine. Unlike my phone or the Switch. It is quite possibly the best screen I've ever seen for being outside in sunlight. The lack of backlight is probably why battery life was in line with Panic's 8-hour estimate when playing games. Though it lasts longer when locked, or should I say, clocked, as the time is always displayed using one of the 3 selectable clock faces, even when the Playdate is in sleep mode. Although it is a little surprising the battery doesn't last longer, like the Neo Geo Pocket Color for 40 hours, given the lack of backlight here, but it does the job. The system also has a single mono speaker between the screen and the crank. The quality is alright, but I wouldn't recommend turning it up all the way as there is some distortion at high volume. The overall hardware lends every game a unique and eye-catching retro look, which stands out even more with the decidedly more modern sound design, which adds a lot to each title. From things like the sound added for cranking up and down an elevator, a retro chess game that makes it sound like an old computer, or cranking slowing down or speeding up sounds depending on time, there are a lot of different fantastic soundscapes in the first season of Playdate games. The Playdate is full of charm even beyond the cute form factor. While locked, pressing a button reveals a set of eyes and a thought bubble appears saying press unlock twice, and on each press one eye opens. There's also a fantastic intro animation that is presented when first turning on the Playdate. Try not to miss it, although we've been told they're working on a way to see it again in the settings. Fittingly, the entire setup process is quick and easy for a fun and quirky device, where you'll create a Playdate account and connect it to your Wi-Fi so you can start downloading all your new games. The entire OS feels quick and snappy overall, although I was surprised some games have loading even though it was super brief. But I do love how most games allow you to pick up right where you left off in a previous session. I also like some of the smaller details, like pixel art in the settings, or how the screen shakes when you can't go any farther, which are nice touches. Even selecting a game is fun when using the crank to scroll back and forth. Oh right, the games! Because it doesn't matter how amazing a device is if the games aren't any good, and with 24 of them here, at least eventually, they cover a wide spectrum, including smaller scale experiences like 360, larger scale ones with an actual story such as Ratcheteer, a few nods to the past like Snake, a music creation tool called Boogie Loops, a match 3 puzzle in Pick Pack Pup, Runner and Up in Smoke, and plenty more. For the review period, Panic put us in an accelerated rollout of the season, allowing us to access 2 games every day instead of the weekly release schedule that you'll experience yourself. A bright blue light beams from the lock button whenever new games are available. You really can't miss it, which is useful so you don't forget to try out the new arrivals. Overall, I loved the range of experiences in Season 1. There are a lot of new game experiences for me, like Echoic Memory where I had to slow down sound loops and match a rhythm. Or hilarious new takes on old ones, like Sasquatchers, a tactics game about getting close to cryptids and then taking the best photo for social media using the crank for positioning. I also found myself saying, just one more run, way too much in Whitewater Wipeout by Chuhai Labs, which included Giles Goddard who helped create 1080 snowboarding and Star Fox. Others have a simple concept like Flipper Lifter's crank-powered elevator to move around penguins, and remind me of NES games of old. And if you love spaceship shooter games, there are 3 very different variations here in Hyper Meteor, Star Sled, and Battleship Gaudios, all of which using the crank in some way but mostly for more precise movement. Not every game uses the crank, which I appreciated so it didn't end up feeling forced too often, such that it could at points with Pick Pack Puffs, which required me to fold and unfold the crank, which while neat, also got old quick. Inventory Hero doesn't use the crank at all, and it's a game that didn't sound too appealing to me at first. I mean, how fun can only managing the inventory really be? Well, it turns out quite a bit, so it's actually super addictive and fun. Another that uses the crank sparingly is Zipper by Bennett Foddy, a samurai game that's all about positioning and only uses the crank to maybe become invisible? And look at that clever change up in the start menu for a restart option. Dark, but fitting. I probably love this game the most out of the ones featuring mostly traditional inputs, and a common thing between it and Whitewater Wipeout is the huge amount of character and personality added via the simple narration in each one. There's actually a lot of great and humorous writing on the Playdate so far, and then there's a simple snack, which plays like Snake, which is great for a quick break. But does the Playdate have a killer app? The Mario 64 or Half-Life Alyx of the system? Well, Crankin's Time Travel Adventure by Kita Takahashi might just be that for me. And true to its name, it takes full advantage of the crank, and only the crank, as you use it to send Crankin forward or backward, faster or slower, depending on how quickly you spin it. The goal is to get him on the date he's late for, while avoiding hazards along the way, in an adventure that spans more than 40 levels, and it might just be a masterpiece. Okay, not quite, but I really do love this game. It's quirky and funny, and it feels like it's something that could only work with crank-based controls, allowing it to delve further into weirdness. Now, not all the season was for me, like the text-heavy Demon Crest 85, which had a little bit too much reading in there, or Saturday Edition, that's a slower-paced adventure game, which aren't quite my style. And Lost Your Marbles, though cute and charming in the story part, doesn't quite nail the pinball feel they're going for in half the game. But with so many games, almost everyone here is sure to find out at least a few favorites. For now, Playdate is only committed to one season, though they've told us they're looking at the possibility of more. But if the 24 games in Season 1 aren't quite enough for you now, you can also buy or download games or apps from elsewhere too. And sideload them to your Playdate, such as Bloom from itch.io or Playnote Studio, which gives you a new way of playing back DSiWare's Flipnote Studio animations. Unfortunately, there's no official Playdate store, making it kind of a wild west to find games at the moment. Playdate has also released a handy web tool called Pulp to make your own games if you're interested in taking a crack or crank at it. I wasn't able to try it out a ton, but it seems powerful and possibly a little bit more of a learning curve than say Nintendo's Game Builder Garage, but simpler than Unity or Game Maker. While the Playdate may seem like a bit of a gimmick, the amount of fun I have with it is proof that there's more here than the novel input crank. Obviously, it's not something if you're looking for AAA games, but if you love indie games like me, it's an incredibly appealing little device that's well built and full of charm and unique experiences that truly felt fresh to play. Plus, the fact that it fits in your pocket only adds to the charm of it all. And there's something to be said about knowing that you'll have new experiences to play every single week for 12 weeks total with a ton of variety and novelty across them. To have full access to them included in the price, and to have enjoyed so many of them myself personally, is pretty dang cool. In the end, I loved the Playdate, even when it can be a little hard to see indoors in some areas. And I'm excited to see how it evolves. Hopefully there's some more games down the line, including ones that take advantage of some of the currently underutilized features like Bluetooth, microphone, and accelerometer. If you're interested in finding out more about the Playdate, you can see the Things We Learned video on the right, or check out our unboxing. Thanks so much for watching. For indie games and more, crank that subscribe button and stay tuned to GameXplain. I think I'm going to go forward and backward in time now. Goodbye.